Well, man, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So before we get into your work and life and kind of peel back the layers, I want to know 4 years ago, we were really trying to figure this pandemic out. And it hit everywhere in a very specific way. I know LA was a little hardcore. How did you survive that time period and how did it change the way that you live your life now?
I don't know if it's changed the way I live my life now. I would say back then obviously in LA it was very difficult, right? Like we were really I don't know, quarantined, I guess. Is that
Yeah.
the right word? What was the and I think in general, um I did it halfway. Like I wasn't like really hardcore, like, no, I'm never gonna see anyone because I just don't think that's emotionally healthy. And I don't know if I'd be able to handle that based on my personality. But I
Yeah.
was also not like, yeah, I'm just gonna take it how it goes and just get sick and stuff. So I kind of just stuck with a tight knit group of friends that I could trust. And we were like, all right, let's hang out together and we'll just do what we do normally, and just play it safe, but not too safe. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best way to go in general in life anyway, right? Like take your chances, but don't take too many chances.
Yeah. 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 Don't become evil Knievel because that could hurt for sure.
Right.
So let's get to the root of what you do for a living here in 2024 on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?"
Huh.
How do you answer that child?
That's a hard one. That's exactly like what my cousin was asked that, and she said, "Well, I don't know what my dad does. He's on the phone a lot and he plays a lot of golf." You know? And I feel like that's not necessarily me, but I do a lot of different things. But I would say I'm an author first because I have to say that because I want my book to sell.
Sure.
But I'm also like mainly I'm a life coach. That's probably a life and writing coach. I teach often most of my students are like junior high to high school age kids. I think a lot of parents hire me because at that junior high stage, there's like, look, my kid's not listening to me more. I don't know what they're doing, and they don't like me.
Yeah.
So that's when I kind of take over and I kind of teach them how to write. But what I've found is like teaching how to write is all about like learning your voice
Yeah.
and how to project your voice and like what is your voice. And you can't figure out what your voice is if you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's where the life coaching comes in. So I would say life, writing coach, and then author, even though I started with author because
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Exactly. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
third grade. I wanted to be a paleontologist.
Wow. Okay.
Like, I feel like that's a lot of kids until they realize, oh, it's just like digging up bones. You don't actually get to see dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was me. I was like, oh, I love the stegosaurus. I want to be a paleontologist. And
Yeah.
then my father threw ice cold water on that because he's just like, do you know what they do? They're like, they just dig stuff up. You're not actually encountering the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So then I wanted to be a doctor. And of course, at that point, my parents were like, yes, that's a great decision. Go for that. Right.
Yeah.
And then I realized I just wanted to do it to help people. And in high school, I realized, oh, there's a lot of different ways you can help people without, go joining the medical field because I didn't really like chemistry and I
Yeah.
wasn't a great student. So, there went that.
So how did this happen? Take me back to where you were born and raised and how your love of writing and becoming a coach, how did all these seeds get planted into you to evolve into you today?
It's multi-pronged. I guess that's like everyone's life. It's fairly complex, right? But I would say like the personality stuff and the life coaching stuff came from me just kind of having a different personality growing up. And it wasn't bad. Like I was lucky. Like it was a weird personality, but it wasn't weird bad. You know how there are certain personalities that get weird bad. And
Yeah.
by weird bad, I mean like how society views it. I don't view it as bad, but I had a weird, okay, and kind of cool personality growing up, but it still felt different. So I
Yeah.
was kind of like that person who was generally always around people, but sometimes felt alone,
Yeah.
even though they're surrounded by people. So I learned a lot about personality theory because I got interested in that, and I kind of followed that path. And then on the other path for writing, I really loved movies. So actually, my academic background is in screenwriting. So I majored in screenwriting at UCLA, or studied screenwriting at UCLA rather. I majored in English, both writing fields. Um, and I just got into writing that way, and they kind of just all came together as I started teaching and teaching writing. And then I threw my personality theory in there because I started encountering kids and I realized that was kind of the big problem is people just don't take the time to understand themselves.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to start at an early age,
Yeah.
right?
So what's your favorite screenplay?
Oh, that's like favorite movie or favorite like screenplay that I've
I
read.
I mean, well, yeah, I mean, I think they're different organisms.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say this one. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's the one that got me into movies and I loved it, and it was Pulp Fiction. So, yeah.
Dude, it's so funny you say that because in the late 90s I went to LA, and you know how they sell scripts on the
Uh-huh.
I bought Pulp Fiction by Avery and Quentin, and I remember reading through that and I was like, Travolta, and I saw the parts where they like did their own ad lib, you know,
Mhm.
and it was amazing. I gave it to a kid. My stepson had a friend that was going to Chicago to get into film, and I gave him that. I said, "This is one of my most coveted things in the world," and I gave him that script.
Nice. That's a
It was,
great script to have,
oh my God.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So
was the first thing I bought. It was the first book that I ever, I guess it's a book. First book I ever bought, and it was at Skylight Books, which I was super happy because my book's there now, and I was like, "Oh," I took a picture of it and everything.
yeah,
Yeah, that was yeah, Pulp Fiction.
that's cool. What about literature? What was the book growing up that you read that really left an impression?
You know, I'd say growing up, ooh, I love Salinger, and I grew up reading Catcher in the Rye, but I always, recommend Franny and Zoe as opposed to Catcher in the Rye. I mean, The Catcher in the Rye is great, and I love the ideas, all about people being phony, but I think Franny and Zoe is a better story.
Yeah.
I'd say like Salinger. I read a lot of Tolstoy growing up, and I read a lot of Nabokov, a lot of Russian authors, mainly because this is going to sound random, but I had a math teacher in high school, and he said that I didn't have to pay attention in math class as long as I was reading a Russian novel.
Wow.
Okay, like, so I just always had a Russian novel. So I was reading War and Peace. I read Anna Karenina. I read Lolita. I read Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. Yeah, all the Russians. And I didn't learn much about math, but I learned a lot about literature.
But they were so deep, man. I mean, those
Oh yeah,
books were crazy deep. Like what was going on in Russia at the time? Because there
yeah.
was such an oppressive rule going on, but these people were such free thinkers. They were harvesting such a fertile bed of narrative. It was wild.
Yeah, it's like it's crazy how if you just look at Russian art in general in that background, it's just like tremendous. The amount
Yeah,
like music and literature and
yeah,
art. Yeah, it's incredible. And I felt like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy especially spoke to me because
yeah.
they were of like this mindset, or back to the personality stuff. They had a personality that was a little different as well. So they were a little bit more introspective.
Hmm.
As opposed to I'm not really totally into like the Pushkin, like the action hero stuff. I mean, that's fun. That's fun to
Yeah,
watch. And hey, look, Steven Seagal was my favorite actor growing up. I know that's embarrassing. Speaking of Russia, Steven Seagal is my favorite actor growing up when I was like 10. But as I got older, I think less action and more like looking deeper into the each other.
yeah,
To me.
for sure. So who's been a hero or an inspiration for you in your life?
Aside from my father, and well, I should say my mother too, but specifically my father for sure. Like, he's passed away maybe over 10 years ago. But I think my dad, because he kind of taught me to look at things differently. I think the first thing he said, well, not the first thing he said, but the first bit of advice I really remember was like, at the end of the day, for life, you just got to do what you want. Don't care what people think, because at the end of the day, no one cares
Yeah.
about what you do. So you got to care what you do and just do it. And I like that because it was just like, you know what? That it helped with my personality theory too, because a lot of people have different personalities, and at the end of the day, you just have to be true to yourself and not worry about what other people are telling you should want and how you should be.
So if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, hang out with them for a bit, who would it be?
Oh, that's a hard one. Alive. Because
Yeah.
I always said JD Salinger for this question, but I know he died like
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago. Uh, I mean, Barack Obama. I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of. Oh no, David Letterman. I'm gonna say David Letterman.
Yeah, that's a
You know,
great answer.
I loved Letterman growing up, and he probably would never want to meet me. But I would love talking to David Letterman. He's awesome.
Yeah, that would be great, man.
Yeah.
Um, what is your motivation every day to get up and to do this work that you do? You're creating, not only are you creating your own worlds, but you're helping the youth find their voice. What is that motivation for you to give all of that every day?
I just love when people, especially kids, get it. When they finally get that feeling of like, oh, this is what you're talking about. And not like factual stuff, like, oh, I understand the theory of gravity. More just like when they start understanding, oh, the stuff I learned in school is important, but learning about myself is more important, because at the end of the day, I want to have a happy, fulfilling life. And I can't do that. That's not coming from the outside. That can only come from the inside. And that takes more work. Like,
Yeah.
that takes a lot of work. And I meet a lot of like 18, 19-year-old students who just haven't put in the work. And thus I have to work on that. It's to not no fault of their own. Oftentimes the parents are telling them, just focus on school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of catching up to be done. And I love it when I can start early with a kid and they understand it at a certain point. That
So of
gets me.
all Yeah, so of all of the kids that you've worked with, what's been one of your favorite client success stories?
This is going to be random. I don't necessarily know if it counts as a success story because I didn't put as much work in, but I definitely learned something from it, and it really affected me. I had a student. This is when I was back, like I was 18 years old, and I was doing a counseling course, and I used that opportunity to teach kids about personality that I was learning about. And there was this one kid who just was not, he was a jock and he was just like, I'm not into this. I don't care what is going on inside me. I only care about what's outside. Right. And I'm like, oh gosh, another one of these kids. And back then I didn't have as much patience. And so he actually quit the classes maybe like 3 weeks in. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever. That's like, I mean, at that point I was just like, okay, whatever. I don't
Yeah.
care. And then he came back to I saw him again like 10 years later, no, maybe not 10 years, so like 7 years later. And he had just came back from Afghanistan. So he went there, he became a Marine after high school, and he was in Afghanistan. And he came back and he said, like, I want to thank you because the things that you taught me, I didn't really think about back then. But when I started killing people, this is literally his words, when I started killing people, it started affecting me in such a way where I had to really think about meaning in things, right? The meaning of life.
Yeah.
He said the stuff that I taught him helped him do that and helped him get
Wow.
over and like kind of get through that. I shouldn't say get over it, but get through that. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like that's was awesome. That's probably the best compliment I ever got from a student. And it also kind of taught me that I should not underestimate
Yeah.
uh, kids or people. Never underestimate people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So of all of these things that you've done and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I think I'm proudest of what I've done in terms of following what I want to do. Like someone told me the other day, they're like, you're like 40 years old, and because I think I had said something like, yeah, I don't ever want to wake up before 10 a.m. or have to wake up before 10 a.m. on a regular basis. And he's like, you're getting to be like almost 40. I'm like, yeah, so that means I'm almost at retirement age, so I'm almost there to where I never have to get that point.
Yeah.
And I know not a lot of people have that choice, but I was able to have that choice based on chances that I took. So I think I'm most proud of sticking to my guns and sticking to what I love and what I know and taking chances. And what ends up happening is I started an education company, so I started my own business. And so the nice thing about starting your own business is, of course, you can wake up when you want,
Uh-huh.
or at least you wake up when your clients make you wake up. And at that point, it was later on. So I think
Yeah.
staying true to myself, that's what I'm most proud of.
So speaking of youth, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you impart? And would that version of you listen?
Definitely, this is going to be a concrete bit of advice, but I would say when you get to college, intern, do things. And I always tell students that too, like do actual things when you're
Yeah.
going to school, as opposed to thinking, what you're doing now, and then you're going to graduate. And it's like, okay, now I'll have stuff falling in front of me. Like I'll have people falling over me trying to hire me. And I would definitely say, like, just whatever it is, do anything, especially the free things, because the free things are going to be the things that you can get and you can get probably in your field. So yeah, I would definitely, and would I listen? I think I would listen depending on how I delivered it. If I delivered it in a very straightforward, sarcastic, mean sort of way, like my dad used to deliver advice, I think I would listen because
Yeah.
I would click like, oh, I like that. That's honest. That sounds honest. I was
Yeah.
never good with coddling. I think coddling never worked for me. So,
I remember in college, I was an intern at a radio station. It was a big deal for me to get in, and all these disc jockeys that I listened to as a kid were there. So I used to go and get food during a break. It was for the Kansas City Royals pre and post game show.
oh,
So
nice.
it was old baseball players, and I used to go and pick up food at this famous steakhouse. And sometimes I would get to eat, and other times I wouldn't. But but I learned so much, and I kind of had the run of the studio, and I could do things, and it was really cool, and it was huge for me to see that world that I was studying to get into. It was magnanimous.
Yeah, and you got to meet George Brett, maybe.
No, I did
Oh,
when I was a kid.
oh, okay.
I was an autograph hound, so I went
Oh,
after all
okay.
those
That's
guys.
awesome. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that real world experience, I think in the words of my uncle who told my cousin after his son after graduating NYU Business School, he was like, okay, great. Now it's time to learn.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's, just doing the real world stuff. Oh, great. School is great and we do learn things in it. But I felt like I learned most of them when I was in college. Most of the things I learned were just from the people I met, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
So
for sure. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I I always used like to I used to tell my tutors they should always have a certain role when they're teaching. And I probably take on that role as well, so that my perception of myself is a well-intentioned con man.
Okay.
And by that I mean for my students, in that like I will lie. My students know I will lie to them. I will trick them, all in fun. I will try my best to manipulate them to get them to do what I want them to do. But all of those things are well intentioned, in that my only goal is to help them grow and to empower them. So it's not to teach them biology or whatever. It's just to help them grow in whatever aspect they need. And I might pull out all the tricks to do that. And I think most of my students know that I also will lie and cheat and, trick them. So.
That's a great title to have. So if anyone wants to pick up your latest book, they want to hire you as a coach, any of the good business, where do they go?
You can go to projectutopia.com. That's where you can hire me as a coach. And it's also the book links are there too, but you can buy the book anywhere. I guess they say anywhere you buy books. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the different bookshop.org, all those places.
Okay.
Um, and then if people want to take the personality test, which is what my book's about, like personality typing and all, they can go on utopiaproject.com, and that's utopia like the YouTube. So YOU, utopiaproject.com.
Excellent. Eric, this has been great, man. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. I loved
Oh,
it.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Best.